What's up YouTube, Saf here on Super Saf TV, and in this video I'm going to be comparing the specs of the Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini to the Samsung Galaxy S5. So the S5 Mini has just been announced today, and it goes on with Samsung's usual trend of announcing their flagship and a few months later announcing a smaller version, a more compact version for those of you out there who prefer something a little bit more comfortable to use with one hand. So they did this with the S3, the S4 and now with the S5. Now the thing with the S5 Mini and with the other mini versions is that they're not just smaller versions with the same specs, they're usually some cutbacks in specs as well. What are those cutbacks? Well, do hit that thumbs up button and let's find out in this head-to-head spec comparison. So let's start off with the most obvious difference, which is the size. Now the S5 Mini, as the name suggests, is smaller compared to the S5, roughly about 10.9mm in height, 7.7mm in width, but it is 1mm thicker. Now this is going to mean, generally speaking, that it's going to be more comfortable to hold in one hand, and it's going to be easier to use with one hand as well. And for those of you out there who don't like the large devices, the 5.1 inch or 5-inch devices as the Samsung Galaxy S5 is, then this is going to be a little bit more of a compact version, and it's going to let you have a similar experience but in a smaller package. Now, as I mentioned, with the screen size, the Samsung Galaxy S5 has a 5.1 inch screen. The Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini has a 4.5 inch screen. Now, it's arguable whether you can call a 4.5 inch screen a mini, but it is quite a bit smaller compared to the Samsung Galaxy S5, and it is going to be a little bit more easy to use with one hand. Now, in terms of the resolution, the Samsung Galaxy S5 has a full 1080p display, so that's 1920 by 1080. That's roughly about 432 ppi pixel density. Now, there is also a Quad HD version available. It's not widely available, but that is now available in certain markets, and we've just started seeing it recently. But the most mainstream version is the 1080p version. The Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini comes with a 720p display, so that's 1280 by 720. That's roughly about 326 ppi pixel density. So this is pretty good. You've got a very decent pixel density here on the S5 Mini. On the S4 Mini, you had a 960 by 540 display, I believe, and it was below HD, and that was probably one of the biggest complaints of the S4 Mini. So that's nice to see that on the S5 Mini they've taken that on board and included a 720p HD display. Now, moving on to the weight, the Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini does weigh a little bit less as well, 25 grams less compared to the Samsung Galaxy S5 original. So once again, a little bit more compact here. And in terms of the build, they've kept the same build, so we've got that perforated back with that dimpled soft touch finish. Now, this is arguable. Some people may like it, some people may not. I don't think it looks premium, but it definitely does feel very, very comfortable in the hand, and the back is quite grippy as well. So I do quite like the feel of the Samsung Galaxy S5 material, and they've used that on the Mini as well. So that's quite nice to see, and it's definitely better than that glossy plastic that you had with the S4 and the S4 Mini. The other thing that's also been carried over is the IP67 dust and water resistance feature that you've got on the Samsung Galaxy S5. Now that has been continued on to the S5 Mini, so you're not going to have any problems getting a bit of water on it. It's something that we've seen on the Sony Xperia Z devices for some time, and that's been incorporated on the Samsung Galaxy devices these days as well. And the other thing to mention as well is that the Samsung Galaxy S5 has a flap for the USB input, so the micro USB input. This is quite annoying for a lot of people, and I actually know a few people who have managed to snap this as well. And if you snap that, then the water and dust resistant is pretty much useless after you've damaged the flap, or if you leave it open as well and you don't close it properly. So that's something that was quite negative with the S5. They've addressed this on the S5 Mini, and you no longer have a flap, but it is still IP67 dust and water resistant. So they've used some sort of special coating on the USB input, but you no longer have a flap, which is great to see. Now, moving on to the internals of these devices, this is where there's usually quite a few cutbacks. So the Samsung Galaxy S5 has a 2.5 GHz quad-core processor. Now, this is one of the fastest out there. I've done some benchmark and speed tests with the Sony Xperia Z2 as well as the iPhone 5s, which you can check out on the channel, and it's very, very fast and snappy. One of the fastest smartphones out there, as I mentioned. The Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini does cut back on this, and you've got a 1.4 GHz quad-core processor, so quite a bit of a cutback here on the S5 Mini. Now, what this means is generally speaking, in your day-to-day tasks, you're probably not going to notice much of a difference, but for some more heavy and more intensive tasks, you will probably notice a bit of a difference on the S5 mini. In terms of RAM, the Samsung Galaxy S5 comes with 2GB of RAM. The Samsung Galaxy S5 mini comes with 1.5GB of RAM, so a slight cutback in terms of RAM here as well. Not much, but you do have a bit of a cutback. You may notice a little bit of a difference in terms of the multitasking abilities. In terms of the storage versions available, you've got the 16 and 32GB versions on the Samsung Galaxy S5. Now, I've personally not been able to find a 32GB version myself. They may be available in certain markets, but the 16GB version is the most widely available version on the Samsung Galaxy S5. On the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini, you've also got 16GB. You've not got any 32GB version that's going to be available later on, or now there's just 16GB. That's once again nice to see, because the S4 mini only had an 8GB version, so 16GB onboard storage on the S5 mini is pretty good. And you've still got expandable storage, so the S5 mini does have expandable storage only up to 64GB, not 128GB like the S5 original. So you've not got as much storage expansion on the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini compared to the S5 original, but still 64GB via the micro SD card slot on a 16GB phone is pretty good. Now, moving on to the cameras, now this is where we see some big differences. Firstly, the rear-facing camera. The Samsung Galaxy S5 has a 16-megapixel rear-facing camera, and it's an absolutely great camera. It's one of the best out there at the moment. And I've done, once again, lots of comparisons on the channel, so you can go ahead and check out some of the quality of the Samsung Galaxy S5 images that you can get from the rear-facing camera. The Samsung Galaxy S5 mini has an 8-megapixel rear-facing camera, so this hasn't changed since the Samsung Galaxy S4 mini. We would have expected it to bump up slightly in terms of the megapixels. Now, I'm not sure if this has got a large sensor or something compared to the Samsung Galaxy S4 mini, but you still have the same resolution, 8 megapixels. Now, in terms of video, the Samsung Galaxy S5 can film up to 4K, so that's 2160p Ultra HD, which is absolutely great. You don't have video stabilization at this level, but you can still get some very, very good quality of video from the Samsung Galaxy S5. You've also got 720p up to 120 frames a second, which is great for slow motion. The Samsung Galaxy S5 mini, you can only film up to 1080p at 30 frames a second, so you've not got some of these bells and whistles that you get with the Samsung Galaxy S5. In terms of the front-facing camera, you've got 2-megapixel front-facing cameras on both of these, capable of filming at 1080p HD, so this is pretty even here. So that's quite nice to see that they've maintained a 1080p front-facing camera on the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini. On the S4 mini, you only had a 720p front-facing camera. And moving on to some of the hardware features, so the Samsung Galaxy S5 firstly comes with USB 3, so you've got USB 3 input, and that's going to allow faster transfer speeds from your computer. The Samsung Galaxy S5 mini only comes with a USB 2 input. Now, as I did mention, the fact is that you've got a flap here on the Samsung Galaxy S5, and you've not got that on the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini, which does give a bit of an edge to the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini, but it's USB 3 versus USB 2. Now, the other features that you've got IR Blaster on both of these devices, which is great to see, so you can control your television and other devices with your smartphone. And they've also carried over the fingerprint scanner, so the fingerprint scanner on the home button from the Samsung Galaxy S5 is also on the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini, so you can unlock your phone and also make some payments. They've integrated with PayPal. Now, it doesn't work brilliantly, I would say, from my experience of using the Samsung Galaxy S5. You do have to be pretty accurate to unlock your device when using the fingerprint scanner. It's not as good as something like the iPhone 5S, but that's nice to see that they've transferred this over on to the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini. The heart rate sensor as well is also on the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini, and you can measure your pulse rate and use it with the S Health apps. So once again, this is something that we would have expected them to cut out, but they have included this. You've not got as many sensors, so in terms of your air view and air gestures, those are not on the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini. Now, it depends on how much you would actually use those. Personally, I don't really use those on the Samsung devices. They are something that some of you may use. They can be useful, such as air view, having a preview of a few things can be useful, but that's not on the Samsung Galaxy S5 mini. Now, moving on to the operating systems, you've got Android KitKat on both of these devices, which is currently the latest version of Android out at the moment, but both of these also come with TouchWiz, which is Samsung's own skin on a top, so you are gonna have Samsung's own skin. Now it depends if you prefer this or not. It's not too much of a bad skin. Some people do find it quite intrusive, but this is available here on both of these, and it's something that you're not easily going to be able to get rid of unless they have a Play Edition. Now the batteries, the Samsung Galaxy S5 comes with a 2800 mAh battery, which is a solid performer. You can get through the day with medium to heavy use, and it's usually not a problem. You may sometimes need a top up, and it's also removable. The Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini comes with a 2100 mAh battery, so it is quite a bit smaller because you've got a smaller device, you've got a smaller battery in it as well. This is still removable, so you can carry on the spare as well. In terms of performance, we would have to put these side by side, but it is still quite impressive for the size of the device. A 2100 mAh battery. The Samsung Galaxy S4 Mini had a 1900 mAh battery, so there is still an improvement here. Now finally, looking at the price, the Samsung Galaxy S5 right now you can pick it up in the US for roughly about $600 offline, or here roughly about £500, maybe a little bit less here in the UK. So it has dropped since when it initially released. Now with the Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini, they've not confirmed any pricing details as yet, but I'd expect it to be roughly about $450 or roughly about the £350 mark here in the UK, maybe a little bit more when it initially releases. So you are going to be saving a little bit in terms of the price compared to the original S5. And in terms of release dates, it's going to initially release in Russia early July and follow on from that worldwide. We're going to be looking at mid to late July for the worldwide release of the Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini, so you are going to have to wait a little bit to get your hands onto that. And that was the comparison of the Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini to the Samsung Galaxy S5 Original. So as we've seen, there is a few cutbacks in terms of specs. It's not just a mini version of the Samsung Galaxy S5. They have managed to keep a lot of the features though, which is quite impressive, such as the heart rate sensor as well as the fingerprint scanner. And this time you've also got a 720p HD screen with a very decent PPI, pixel density 326, which is very good. This is something that we didn't have with the Samsung Galaxy S4 Mini. What do you think of the Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini? Do drop me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, as always, please do hit that thumbs up button for me. It really does help me out. And why not subscribe to the channel? I've got plenty more content coming up on here. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on Super Saf TV, and I'll see you next time. If you want to see more regular videos like this one, then be sure to hit the subscribe button, which will be below. If you're on a mobile device, it may be somewhere else. If you want to see my previous related video, then hit the link right here. If you want to stay in touch over Facebook, Twitter and Google+, then all of the addresses will be there somewhere, as well as direct links in the description below. Okay, if you're still watching, then that means you've not done one of those things, so, you know. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just gonna go downstairs. See. Okay. There isn't really a downstairs. Anyway, so yeah.